PHNX Cardinals is thrilled to welcome for the first time ESPN NFL insider Mina Kimes. Mina, it's a banner day because we get you on the show. Marvin Harrison Jr. also just debuted here in Arizona for Mina Kimes. So it's a pretty big day for this podcast.
Yeah, I also put up all these Korean flags in honor of Kyler Murray. So we're celebrating Kyler too today for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month.
Absolutely. And it really feels like the organization's finally celebrating Kyler Murray since the regime change, right? We get Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon is just speaking, waxing poetic about his quarterback. He's even mentioning him kind of knocking down some Jays the other night at the Oklahoma City Thunder Mavs game. So like all things are pointing towards Kyler Murray and a big season. And with the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr., like what's your feeling about this Cardinals team going into 2024?
Yeah, I think the point you just made is a really important one, which is that it feels like the organization is backing Kyler, not just with their words, but obviously the actions in drafting Harrison, not even just passing on a quarterback, right? But drafting Harrison Jr. in particular. I think it was on draft day, Kyler put a kind of cryptic tweet out saying, "Ooh, I think something good might happen." And I was like, okay, MHJ, it's happening. It's over. We're done. Because you could not get a better gift as a quarterback than that wide receiver who, I mean, I talked about this a lot headed into the draft. I thought he was the best player in the entire draft. Just an unbelievable prospect. And I'm someone who tends to be on team trade back down, especially when you're a team that's either rebuilding or sort of in, coming off of the beginning of the rebuild, like I would say Arizona is. But Harrison Jr. is such a special player that I think you sometimes have to just stay put, and take the players that you want to rebuild around. And he is certainly that guy.
Could you make an argument, Mina, like outside of the quarterbacks, obviously, that have, more of an emphasis touching the football every play, that Marvin was the most impactful addition, maybe this entire NFL offseason?
For the Cardinals or for any team?
Maybe for just about anybody outside of the quarterback position, I guess.
Yeah, well, he's pretty impactful, especially when you consider the receiver group before, where I think, if I have this right, Pascal might have been the highest paid receiver on the roster. I remember looking at the salary cap, like, whoa. Although I will say, very few people nationally seem to actually watch the Cardinals last year and maybe miss the fact that Trey McBride was unbelievable. And I say that as a Trey McBride dynasty owner who has been gloating about it like I'm, Bill Belichick ever since then. But yeah, I think in terms of what he can do for that offense, certainly up there in terms and level of impact, and not just because of his skill set not just because of the situation that he's walking into, where he's going to ask to be the number one right away and is going to get the Lions' share of targets, but also because the type of receiver he is not scheme dependent. He is not someone you have to call certain plays for. He is a receiver where you just plop him down line of scrimmage and say, "Go win, buddy," and you run your entire offense through him, which I expect Arizona to.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're a confirmed McBridesmaid. That's
Yeah.
That's what one of your colleagues there. We asked Field Yates if he was a McBridesmaid. He says he absolutely is a McBridesmaid. So we've got Mina Kimes on board with being a McBridesmaid as well. I thought you and Field did a great job really kind of breaking down the Cardinals offense and how they really emphasize the run game, how they established that last year. We had the great season in James Conner. They added to that this offseason in the form of Trey Benson, who we heard from today, and then Tip Ryman, number one blocking tight end in the draft. When you look at that, it really seems to be that's what they want their strength to be. But what does that do for Kyler Marvin, this passing game?
Yeah, well, ideally it opens things up, right? Because of the resources that teams will have to allocate towards stopping this rushing attack. By the way, was Tip Ryman the guy who said he likes to throw pots in his spirit? Did I see that?
Yes, that is him. And he also didn't believe in
I
birds.
wasn't high enough on him. Now I know that. I love that. And also, what a great Arizona, a lot of pottery out there as somebody who grew up in the Southwest. I think it really should make life easier for Harrison Jr. and for Kyler in the passing game. And Harrison Jr. is a player who's very accustomed to being double teamed. And yet one of the many reasons why he was my wide receiver one is the level of attention he faced at Ohio State in college. So he is accustomed to being in adverse situations. And I do expect him to face his share of bracket coverage, even with, they just signed Zay Jones. Did I just see that right? Sorry, I'm like, So that helps certainly, and McBride helps, but he's going to get a lot of attention. But hopefully the run game being so dynamic, and it was very dynamic at the end of last season, will open things up for him, give him some one-on-ones as teams have to put more defenders in the box to stop the backs that you talked about, but also Kyler Murray. You know, last year, I thought he showed a lot in the second half of the season, but he was still coming off of the injury. So now you're another year removed from that, and hopefully he's even more dynamic as a runner because of it. I was just talking about Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels on NFL Live, and I mentioned, you know, I sometimes had quibbles with Cliff, the play caller, but one thing he was really good at was calling that quarterback run game. People forget how unbelievable Kyler was his first 2 years, second only to Lamar Jackson in yards per carry, first downs per carry. He actually had more explosive runs than Lamar those first 2 seasons. So hopefully he can get back to that as well.
Jonathan Gannon, I think we all agree, like, showed a lot of promise last year. They beat Philadelphia on the road. They beat Pittsburgh, but they still went 0-6, in the NFC West. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think we'd all love to see this team back in the postseason, especially with Kyler playing 17 games. But the NFC West, as you know, is a different animal entirely. Like, what is it, personnel exclusive, or is it just Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay dominate this division? How do you break through that if you're Arizona and JG?
Yeah, those two coaches are really challenging. And now Seahawks have Mike McDonald, comes from Baltimore, is a really brilliant defensive mind. I think that you really have to go team to team, though, with the Niners. I mean, yeah, they obviously caused problems for the entire NFL. They made it to the Super Bowl, but because of how multiple they are on offense, you have to have really, really special linebackers to match up with them, and very few teams do. Baltimore did. That's why they beat them so badly. And, you know, that obviously wasn't the case in Arizona or really anywhere else in the NFC. So that presents a unique challenge, coupled with the play calling ability of Kyle Shanahan, his ability to isolate defenses at the second level and make their lives miserable. And then with the Rams, again, offensively, just so explosive. Matthew Stafford still playing at such a high level. This run game now is really, really scary. That power running attack with Kyron Williams and that offensive line that they've invested a lot in. So, you know, I really like the things that Arizona is doing, but when I see them losing to those teams, I don't say, oh gosh, that's a failure on the part of Jonathan Gannon. I just think they're still adding the sort of personnel they need to keep up with those offenses.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time in the rebuild. Like, Monty Ossenfort takes this blank canvas and really creates something beautiful, and it's on the rise, no doubt about it. But is it as simple as, you know, they were top 10 offense with Kyler Murray when he came back? Is it as simple as Darius Robinson, Max Melton, that rebuilt defensive line needs to step up and kind of play above board a little bit for this team to really make some noise in 2024?
Yeah, I think the thing about rebuilds is you have to kind of set expectations, right? And I think last year it was like kind of the perfect season because you didn't win too many games to get out of the Marvin Harrison Jr. Business, but you want enough to show that you're heading the right direction. And you also identified the beginnings of, like, okay, who are the players we want to rebuild around? Obviously, McBride is one of them. Paris Johnson is the other. You know, Kyler coming back. Okay, we feel good about the quarterback position. Our running game is awesome. Defensively, all right, we now have Zaven Collins rushing the passer. That looks better. Obviously, our safety duo is still very good. We know that, but there's still massive holes. And now you're kind of in phase 2, which is we're starting to fill some of those holes. Who are the other young pieces of this core? And as you said, you probably do need to hit on at least half of those draft picks to feel good about it. Because if the rebuild is about amassing draft capital, the second phase of the rebuild is those draft picks turning into kind of dudes you feel good about. And so you'd want some of them to show that in year 1.
I want to go back, Mina, if we could, to Kyler. And, you know, he played, I thought, pretty efficient football down the stretch, 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. They had the hardest strength of schedule at the end of last year, and they almost went 500. Yet you see him in this offseason, and he's working his butt off. And yet, you know, preseason rankings, they've got him late teens, early 20s as quarterbacks in the NFL. Why do you think he is such a target for some people, a polarizing player, when in reality, if you're in Arizona, he's the best homegrown quarterback they've ever had?
Yeah. Well, first, like I said, I'm convinced like nobody watched the Cardinals the second half of last year. I'm not trying to like cast shade on anyone just because they don't agree about Kyler necessarily. I just like Trey McBride is a good litmus test for that, because anyone who watched him knows how good that dude is. I already think he's like one of the better tight ends in the NFL, to be honest. I think obviously sort of when you're hurt and you're absent, there's sort of that MIA quality where like it's kind of not present in people's minds. And then if you're not in a team that people are paying attention to, you fall further from people's minds. But I also think the last memory that a lot of national folks have of him is the struggles in the postseason after the year where he had the kind of MVP caliber first half of the season. That's something that he owns, and I think it's something that he's going to have to disprove once he starts getting that national spotlight again. I'm a huge believer in his abilities as a quarterback. I think he has, a very rare and special skill set. And I also, had quibbles with some of the approaches to the offense his first couple of years. So, I think there's a real opportunity for him this year to own this team, this rebuilding team. And it seems like, at least externally, I don't follow the team as closely as you, that there's more, not just organizational buy-in, but team-wide buy-in around him as well. And I think that has to feel good.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It really feels like he's got the most infrastructure he's ever had in his entire pro career. And it's just going to point to a successful season. I just keep thinking about Tip Ryman playing the role of Patrick Swayze in Ghost, but also like imagining himself blowing up somebody in the C gap, which is just an unbelievable visualization. Mina, you've been so kind with your time. We're so grateful we could catch up with you. You spent some time, you went to Mesquite High School, the same high school as Roy Lopez, current Cardinals defensive lineman.
Really?
Like, yeah.
Wow.
Any memories growing up here in the Valley?
That's crazy. People always are like, why aren't you a Cardinals fan? But
why?
My dad was in the military. I was born in Nebraska, lived in California, all over. So even though I went to high school in Arizona, I am Seattle sports because of my dad. I went to Mesquite High School, which was actually new. That's how old I am. When I went there, it had just been built. Not a particularly competitive football team back then. I did recently run into Ryan Fitzpatrick, Highland High. Or no, he was Gilbert. No, he was Highland. And then Brock Purdy was Gilbert, right? Okay. Oh God, that's one of the new
out in Gilbert. Yeah, absolutely right.
Okay. Yeah. Anyways, we're all from Gilbert, and I ran into Fitzpatrick at the Super Bowl, and we reminisced a little bit about Gilbert, Arizona, Filiberto's her time spent there. I hear Gilbert now is like popping, by the way, which is
I just bought a house in Gilbert, and it better be popping. We're looking forward to it. We're leaving Chandler. We're going to Gilbert, and I said, Mina lived there. I feel pretty good about it now.
Not like that. When I was in high school, it was like Dairy Farms, Joe's Real Barbecue. That was
it's still legit.
Shout out Gilbert.
Yeah, Joe's is unbelievable. You wouldn't even believe it where it is right now. So you spent a lot of time at the Fiesta Mall in Mesa then? Is that where you went and spent most of your high school days?
Chandler Fashion Square. No, Chandler Fashion Square was what's up. Or we would go to where they had the AMC like on the north end. I can't remember exactly where it was. There was like a big AMC theater complex. This is like such an Arizona thing. It's just like hanging out at movie theater complexes. People don't understand in LA and New York, but we would just go hang out at the movie theater all the time and just like sit outside of Starbucks. So yeah.
It hasn't changed. Not much has changed, Mina. We're so fortunate to catch up with you. Of course, watch her on a daily basis. ESPN, follow her on Twitter at Mina Kimes, and just continue to keep up the great work. Thank you so much, Mina.
Thanks, Mina.
Thank you so much. And if you're listening, Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny. Yes. I promise we cover the Cardinals more than a lot of national things. So check it out if you're listening to this. Bye, guys.
See you, Mina.